Hello and welcome to AWS Repost Live, the companion live stream for repost.aws. If you haven't tried Repost yet, head over to repost.aws and sign up using your AWS account ID or builder ID. There is a lot of goodness there within Repost you don't want to miss out. So please head over to repost.aws and sign up using your account ID and builder ID and get started today. So if you are not if you know, each week we are live here talking about AWS Repost, your questions on Repost, and dive deep into different use cases within the AWS community. So if you are brand new user getting started with AWS, or if you're an experienced AWS user, you might have questions, and you can head over to Repost and ask those questions, and we'll be here live every week answering those questions, right? So it's an exciting platform. Please get started with Repost. Today, I'm joined by Hugo, Gopi, and Francisco. So Hugo, why don't you get started with an intro, please?
Sure. Yeah. Hello, all. My name is Hugo. I'm a principal cloud support engineer located in Ireland.
Gopi?
Yeah, hi, this is Gopinath. You can call me Gopi. So I'm a senior cloud support engineer located in Dallas, Texas.
And hi, everyone. My name is Francisco Penta. I'm a principal cloud support engineer located in Dublin, Ireland as well. Very happy to be here.
Awesome. Yeah. So again, all the users within this community who are live here joining us today, please let us know in the chat where you're joining us from. We would like to know where you are from and kind of build that community really strong as well. So let us know in the chat where you're joining us from as well, right? So again, today we have an exciting topic, right? So we're going to talk about how do you troubleshoot S3 access denied, right? So if you're an experienced AWS user, or you're just getting started with AWS and S3, you might have seen these access denied errors, right? I definitely have seen this multiple times when I've kind of worked with S3 in the past. So we're going to talk about how do you troubleshoot this with something called a SAW, right? That name itself was very exciting to me when I heard that for the first time. So it's all about support automation workflow, right? So Gopi, why don't you kind of talk a little bit about what is SAW, what are we going to talk about and dive deep today?
Yeah, sure, Anup. So SAW refers to support automation workflow, so which is a automated solution built by AWS support to troubleshoot common AWS issues. So these are pre-built workflows that are already available with AWS Systems Manager, which is inbuilt by AWS support engineers. So we take common set of AWS issues which customer open, for example, S3 access denied issue or EC2 rescue or something like that. So we analyze all the support cases coming into us, and we pre-built the troubleshooting scenario. So this is natively integrated with AWS Systems Manager.
Yeah.
These runbooks are created and deployed as part of the Systems Manager runbook. The customers can save manual efforts in troubleshooting certain scenarios like S3 access denied in this case, where customer would just pass the S3 API that needs to be performed by a certain IAM role or an IAM user, and they could just validate the scenario instead of manually running each and every step. This raw SAW runbook defines a set of scenarios, set of criteria, step by step, to identify what is the issue, what is causing the S3 access denied issue. And it's not only the S3 access denied issue. So there are multiple runbooks for multiple services that the AWS support engineers have already built on. For example, if you want to enable VPC flow logs, there is a workflow for that available in the Systems Manager. Customers could just directly navigate to the Systems Manager. They could just pass the VPC ID and just they will have some basic functionality like how long they would want to set up the retention for the CloudWatch log group for the VPC flow logs, and something like that. And then the whole automation is done. So it's not only for the troubleshooting. So there are also runbooks where you can automate a certain type of configuration. So for example, if you are creating an S3 bucket every month, you could schedule the automation itself instead of manually doing it. So this reduces the manual error, human error, when you are creating a certain set of tasks. So if you are continuing to do it every month or every day, you can completely automate that. So this particular support automation workflow
Yep.
has a set of runbooks which details step by step of every sequence that the support engineers would typically troubleshoot. So, for example, if a customer reaches support engineering saying that their EC2 disk usage is close to 100%, I want to automatically increase the disk EBS and EBS storage and increase the file system partition as well. So in that case, there is a runbook for which monitors the EC2 disk usage, and it could just review the EBS disk usage, use storage, and it would either prefer to increase the disk's EBS storage
Mhm.
allocated to the EC2 instance, and then it would increase the partition as well. So you could run some logs. Uh, there are some run books where you can do the workload review. So there are two types of support run books that SAW provides. One is the one that has a prefix AWS support, and
Yeah.
the other one that has an AWS premium support. So the run books that is available with a prefix AWS premium support is available for business and enterprise support customers, where in some cases enterprise support customers would want to have an extensive proactive service review. In that case, there are some run books as where it would connect to the databases and it would run some queries and pull out some logs,
Got it.
which would be helpful for some solution architects to review it.
Got it. So again, the whole idea is to avoid kind of a lot of manual intervention, right? Pretty much like automate multiple tasks. And as you can see here, I mean, people joining today, right? AWS Repost, we have articles too, right? It's not just about asking questions. You can definitely ask questions. We'd love to get your questions and address live in the show. But as you can see, there is a great article written by a team here about SAW as well, which you can refer. It goes really deep into this article, right? So Gopi, thanks for that intro. Since you mentioned run books, right, I would like to again focus on this question, which we have from Sharon, right? And again, using the repost platform to ask that question as people are getting into these situations, right? In this situation, the question is around, I've made my S3 bucket publicly accessible for my imager to show up, but still I'm getting access denied, right? And as you can see here within the platform, repost platform, a user, one of our expert, already answered it, right? And it's mostly talking about making sure the right permissions, etc., making sure there is no ACLs, which are kind of or block public access, etc. There are so many manual steps the user need to kind of go through to kind of troubleshoot and fix this access denied problem, which almost sure everybody gets into, right? So with this context of SAW support automation workflow and run books, as you mentioned, can you talk a little bit how you go about troubleshooting this with SAW, right? Can we walk through that, Hugo or Francisco here?
Yeah, sure. I can take that one. Thank you so much, Anup. So as Gopi mentioned, so what we have is these run books. So pretty much they are built and they will have a predefined checks based on the use case of that predefined run book, right? For
Yeah.
example, we have this customer question like, okay, he made his bucket public. He has a couple of objects that he wants to share with his users. However, what happens typically is that their users, when clicking on the link that was shared by that customer, they are getting an access denied. So means that that object is not exactly a public object, either require authentication or other features, other forms to access that object. So might be easy when you have a bucket with just a handful of objects, but when you have a bucket that has a few hundreds or
Yeah.
thousands of objects, that becomes really a challenge to understand which of those objects are public or not. That's fair, easy. You have that link, so you can focus on that.
Right.
And for that, so I would like to give a quick demonstration here. Let me just enable my screen here. Not sure if you guys are able to see it. And what happens is that we're going to do an example. Let's say that I have a bucket in my account, right? And I have, so this is a bucket that is public,
Yeah.
and I have 3 objects there. So typically, I would return or share the link to my users. Okay, let's say that I have a picture of a tree that is public. I could just go there and click on this link, and I should be able to get my object. What happens is that when their users click on this link, they are getting an access denied. So that means that something on S3 is not allowing this object to be public.
Yeah.
So keep in mind that, and let's take one step back, looking at the full picture of S3. So when we create a bucket, by default, the bucket is private. So any object that I upload into my bucket, they're going to be private. So I need to, let's say that it has an implicit deny. That means that I have to explicitly allow, either by a bucket policy
Yeah.
or by an object ACL, so that my object can be public, and so that any users without authentication can access and display that object. And on top of that, S3 also has other features. For example, the block public access that can be enabled account-wise or just for that bucket. So all of these, we can start like, okay, there is a lot of checks now that I need to look. I need to look at the bucket policy. I need to check at the object ACL. I need to check at the account level block public access,
Right.
and or check my BPA, the block public access into the bucket.
Yeah.
And for that we have is the runbooks, right? So by running this runbook, you can actually run that and check what's happening. So how do we do that? So we goes into system management. Here we will see on our left automation.
Mhm.
So we can run these automations from there. So it will display a lot of, and let's say that I want to execute an automation. As Gopi mentioned, there is, as you can also see here, we have a lot of different automations for different use cases.
Yeah.
And as you can see, we would need to search. But I have it here already bookmarked, and I want to specifically run this automation. So the AWS support, I want to troubleshoot S3 public read. So I'm going to click there. So let me open up here and just copy the link and go here. Okay.
There you go. Yeah.
There you go. So we have this runbook, and pretty much when we start, what this does is this runbook will tell us what it does, what is the goal of this runbook, and it's really great because we have here, looking at this, we have this pretty much all of the steps that this runbook will do. Let me try and zoom in here a bit so that
That's the step functions, classic step functions.
exactly. So it's very easy to understand what's going on. So we can also look at it, but here it's very easy. So what happens is that, okay, I click on the start. So this runbook will ask you for some information, like, for example, what is your bucket, what is the object or not, and what you are looking to get from this runbook. And pretty much when you click the start, so this is the checks that this runbook will do. It will check if the bucket has access, bucket information, check if the get public access, check bucket payer, like who is paying. For example, if you have a bucket where you enable the requester pays, pretty much who is making that request needs to pay for that request. It will also block public access because typically, if you are not doing an authenticated request, it's an anonymous. And well, if the request that needs to pay that request, and if you are an anonymous user, there is no way for S3 to charge for that request. So it checks the bucket policy, the context of the keys, etc. So, and in the end, will give us the setup or the scenario that it finds out. So let's, for example, run this in a real. Let me run this automation. So let me try in here because this is opening up on a new window. Okay, so here is what we will have it, right? So we have several different modes to run this. Let's use the simple execution. So pretty much what it does is going to ask me for all of these parameters. I could use a role, let's say that I have a specific role, but if you don't, some of them are optional. That means that, for example, for the role, if I don't define any role to run this automation, it will use the one that I'm accessing to the console. So in this scenario, let's go for my bucket name. So we know that is AWS repose dash public. So this is the bucket that I want to target.
Mhm.
And it will ask me also the prefix name. It's like, okay, do you have a specific object, or if you have a small object, we can actually check this to all of your keys. So pretty much what this does is going to list your bucket, and for each key will perform those checks to understand if your bucket is public or not, if you have access or not. And you can define the maximum number of objects that will do. So pretty much it will only list 5 objects and do that check to those 5 objects. So pretty much we can leave all of the rest because they are optional. So you do not need to actually run that.
But it's pretty detailed, right? You have a lot of flexibility for the users.
Yes, exactly. Nail on, because as you can see, like there is a lot of options that you can enable. But if you are only looking to do a quick check to see, okay, I have this bucket, I have these objects which I enable to be public, but for some reason my users are not able to access.
Right.
Instead of you do that troubleshooting, look into each one. Sometimes we don't even know like where do I start. All of these features that has on S3, you can just go there and this will do it for you.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So let's say that we put the bucket name and I have no specific object. I want to list 5 objects. I know that on my bucket I only have 3, so it's going to be pretty simple. I can also have CloudWatch alarms and tags and even a link so that I can run over the CLI. But over here, let's be pretty simple. Okay, and right now I click execute, and what is happening? This run book is now being executed. So it's now, as you can see, okay, overall it's now working, right? And we can start see some of those checks, what is doing, what is the status of that check. And it's interesting because we are seeing some of here that are failing. And if we click on the execute steps, we can also get an understanding what happened, what it failed. So over here, and we will have, for example, one of the check. What is this check? To check if the bucket is, if the public access is enabled.
Right.
And what they'll tell us is that, okay, public access are configured to ignore both public ACLs and any public bucket policies. So that's great because it already gives us some insights on what's going on. Could it be because I have this block public access enable, and so that's why my bucket is not able to do it?
Makes sense.
And similar to the next one, for example, get bucket policy. Okay, why did it fail? Let me check. So we can also go here and see the same. Okay, great. So what is the message? And it pretty much says like, okay, no such bucket policy. Great. So I do not have any bucket policy that is granting my buckets the permission to be public read.
Makes sense.
Cool. And from there, so once it finished, so we have now the overall status, successful, 2 failed. We already checked what was those failed checks, and the output we can actually see. Okay, great. So let's look at what. So this is pretty much like a summary of exactly of all of the checks that it did. So it checks that, okay, the buckets or the accounts, as we mentioned earlier, right? It's enabled for block public access, so are configured to ignore those ACLs. So this pretty much tells me, okay, this is the reason why, even so I have a bucket that I enable, that I put some public ACLs, I'm not able to have my objects being be able to provide that access to the users, right? And so let's zoom in a bit here so that the folks online can better read, right? So, and this is what is going to tell me. So, okay, great. Now I know exactly why. So I could now go to my buckets and I could just have it enabled, or in this case, disable that public access. And for example, remember that we have on S3, let's do that, right? So
Yeah.
I have my buckets, let's say public access. Oh, there you go. You see, so very simple. Now I know exactly where to look for, because my run book told me that while I was executing, I found out that you have the block public access enable account level or bucket level. So I can just go specifically into this account level and I understand, like, okay, great, this is why I'm seeing it. So I could just go there and mark and save those changes. Of course, it will ask me to confirm, etc. I will say yes, and now my block public access will be disabled, and my objects that have a public read ACL will now be able to. So I could now be able to read those. So this is, for example, one of those scenarios, right? Now, but other typical scenarios is one example, and I think that's one of the questions that we have.
Yeah, you do have that question.
Exactly. So what we are able to see is like a typical scenario is users on the same accounts.
Yeah.
They are getting access denied. Let's say that I have a bucket. On my bucket, I have, let's go back to my buckets, right? So I have here, and again, similar objects, 3 objects. These objects were uploaded into my bucket, but when I try to access an object, I'm not able to access it. Or let's say that I have a user in my accounts. So myself, I'm user A. I created a role for another user B, and that user B is telling me like, hey, look, Hugo. So when I using these credentials, assuming my role, when I try to access objects on this bucket, I'm getting an access denied. So I'm not able to access those objects. So it's odd, because typically we say like, okay, I'm on the same account. I clearly allowed that role permissions to S3 to read the objects and to list the bucket into this specific bucket. So this user should be able to access that. So, and we can check, we can also check, right? So what we do is same scenario. So we go into our systems management, and we also have, again, automations, and we will execute an automation. One of them that we have is the troubleshoot access same account. So this is a run book that is specific to troubleshoot these scenarios where both users are on the same accounts, and however, one user is not able to access those objects.
Yeah, yeah. I think we have a question on that too.
Oh, great.
I think
Yeah.
you already covered that really well. So as you see, right, the exact situation what Hugo covered. We got a question from one of the users here, Sadil, if I'm pronouncing that name right, or the username right. The same scenario, right? Within the same account, two people are not able to kind of access the one which was already shared with another user, right? So that's awesome. And Hugo, I think there are a couple of articles as well within Repost which kind of covers the whole situation, right?
Oh, yeah.
How do I troubleshoot 403 access denied errors? Where all resources are from the same AWS account, right? I think that's the scenario which you have covered. So again, people who are attending the show, if you want to kind of walk through the whole thing, whole article offline, feel free to do that as well. It's pretty detailed, as Hugo was explaining here. Hugo, it's I think this is the same thing as well, right? How do I troubleshoot access denied error from an S3 bucket with public read access? That's the same thing which you've explained in the previous step as well, right? The block public access.
Exactly. Because
we have a lot of articles around the subject here with SOA automation.
It is a common pitfall. But the great thing about using the automations is also that you don't need to go step by step. You will forget something. That's inevitable. So even if you're an experienced user, you can leverage those to just go through all the checks that you will normally have to run manually, and then get immediately to the exact cause why that is failing. So I think that's a lot of misconceptions. The fact that maybe those should be used by people that are not so much experienced, but we see that a lot of users are using those just to make their life easier, because you don't need to go through all those steps by yourself. 100%. If you look at And if you look at the articles, you can see they can be quite lengthy because there's quite a few things to check.
Yeah.
And then you skip one of the steps, and then you need to go all over it again. And again, the automation can do all of this for you and giving you the exact reason.
Yeah, I love the fact that as you saw, I mean, kind of showed the whole flow, right? Step functions, workflow, classic step functions, right? Even for an experienced user, they can kind of look at what exactly is going behind the scene, right? I think it's a great balance for both an expert as well as a user who is getting started, right? Which is pretty awesome in my mind, for sure. Awesome.
Yeah. Exactly, and for example, like you mentioned, so it's very easy to and like Francesco, it's very easy to mention. And for example, one of the examples also, we have a runbook specifically for troubleshooting S3 access SIM accounts. And I can show you. Actually, we can run this same automation to another scenario. And what happens is when you run that automation, similar to all of those automations, you will have that step functions type, right? That will tell you exactly, okay, this is all the steps I'm going to run on your behalf. So you do not need to memorize, you do not need to take note of what is the steps that you need to, because this automation will run it for you. And you just point, you tell what is the bucket, what is the role that you want to go against it, and just hit execute. And as we saw earlier, right, so it will run each of them independently. It will give you the output for each of those tasks, and you can actually check, okay, what did it fail, what was successful, what is this check did, and what is the result from there. And once the automation finish, you will get that summary of, okay, I check this, and this is the cause for you, so that you can now pinpoint, or you can just focus on, okay, let me find out how to fix this, instead of just going all over the place trying to figure out what happening, looking at logs, confirming if the user is actually using that credentials or not. Yeah, exactly. So this is very easy.
And these are best practices, which is again coming from AWS, right? And you make modification as needed for these runbooks,
I can take that. Yeah, so we do review these runbooks and make changes according to the new releases, and if there is some behavior that changes, we do from AWS support. We do review these runbooks periodically and then make changes appropriately. So in addition to what Hugo said, like we also have individual knowledge center article for every runbook that we have created, so which provides a step-by-step guidance on what is expected out of the runbook and what it's supposed to do. In addition to providing just the output in the S3 access denied case, it was just providing just an output of what the issue could be and what you're supposed to do. But there are some runbooks as where the runbook would remediate for you. Runbook would say, hey, make changes for you. If this is the scenario, make changes for me. Like if this user is full, increase the EBS storage. Similarly, we have a lot of other things. So it's not only that AWS provides a set of criteria based on the incoming support case volume and the common issues that the customers report. Customers can create this themselves. Like, for example, if a customer followed a change management scenario where they have to automate a change configuration, which they are doing regularly, they could just create a series of steps and they could completely automate it to avoid all the human errors, as I mentioned earlier. So
that's awesome. And I believe we don't charge for anything for running the runbook, right? I think for
execute, there is no separate subscription for AWS support runbooks itself. It's just the system manager execution that will be it.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Keep on that also, you will also charge for all the API calls that's the underlying service. For example, on the S3, because if we need to list the buckets, you will pay one API call to list my objects, or all of those control that needs to get the bucket policy, get the account block policy, all of those. But it's just one API, and so
there's no charge to run the SSM like runbook here, but the behind the scene, the API calls and whatnot is charged. Yes, okay. That
Yeah,
makes sense.
exactly. Because this is pretty much like a front end. Because on the background,
Sure.
the SSM runbook still needs to go to S3
Yeah.
normal APIs and see, hey,
Totally.
get the bucket policy, check the object ACL, and even if we need to get, let's say that on that example previously, if we had, for example, only one object that was missing the ACL to be public, so S3 will list the objects. For each object, we'll do a get object, and if it's able to retrieve the object, so typically we'll only do a range get, so we will not get the full object because it's more than enough for us in this scenario for the runbook to understand if the object is public or not. And if we are able to get a few bytes of the object, that means it's good. You are able to download it.
Totally makes sense. Awesome. Great. And just want to double click on this. And for people who just joined as well, right? Kind of recap a little bit here. Gopi, you mentioned a little bit on availability of these runbooks on like enterprise and dev support plans, right? Can you repeat that part a little bit to make sure everyone is clear there?
So there are two categories of runbooks. One with the prefix AWS support, which is available for everyone, and there is another category which prefix with AWS premium support. So there are certain kind of entitlement only AWS offers with enterprise support. So enterprise support has something called proactive services. So as part of this proactive services review, there are some certain runbooks which prefixes with AWS premium support, and it's available only for enterprise support.
Yeah.
But most of the common tasks of troubleshooting is available to all customers, like S3 access denied, which starts with AWS support. It's available to all customers.
Awesome. Great. Cool. I think we can switch gears a little bit. Right now, we saw how you use SAW with access denied and whatnot. And Hugo, I think you briefly touched on this, right? This is not just for S3 access denied. Do you want to also touch on what other services?
Yeah, definitely. Exactly. So, for example, as we mentioned, we check and we can run again a demo here, to execute this troubleshoot S3 access same account.
Yeah.
So the process is still the same, very similar. For example, I have it here already here open. So if we look at the run book, the description, it still tells exactly the same behavior. So it will tell you exactly what is going to do, what you need to input. And here it is, same, step functions scenario where it will tell you, okay, I'm going to, and based on the type of run book, it might check different details. The one that we look at for the S3 public access, so that's, we might consider a straightforward, right? It only has a few checks and it's basic checks. So like, I'm going to check if the BPA is enabled or not, the ACL. But when we are going to, for example, this one, the same account, we now need to check permissions because we have user B that is trying to access the objects on bucket A on the same account. So here we could have the bucket policy that grants access, but the IAM permissions for that specific user, that role also needs to grant access. So this runbook will now perform different steps. And we can see here, right? So when we start execution, it will go into the IAM. Let me just zoom up a bit. So it checks the IAM, it checks the resource type.
Yeah.
All of this is still related to permissions because that's pretty much what's going on, because we need to figure out if that user has the necessary permissions. Because again, we need to keep in mind, when you create an IAM user or a role or a resource, in this case, an S3 bucket, by default, everything is private. So you do not have permissions. You need to explicitly allow those operations to those users, or else they will not be able to access any resource.
Makes sense.
So it goes through and it follows that mindset. So checks for the permissions, and once it has, then it starts to check the bucket policy, if it has KMS, if it has the BPC endpoint. So you see, it starts to go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And to touch a bit what Francesco mentioned, right? So it's very simple for us to like, oh, I forgot KMS, because if I have an object that is encrypted with KMS, a custom managed KMS key, I need to, again, explicitly allow the role B to also have permissions to decrypt that object that was encrypted with that KMS key.
Sure.
So it's very easy for us to miss that step. And then we might look at the IAM role permissions, again, the bucket, the object, and kind of like, what's going on? Why I'm not able to access this when everything looks fine? It's just because, well, the key that was used to encrypt the object is not allowing that user to decrypt it. So you can get an access denied from there.
Makes sense.
Okay, great. So let's say that now we have this scenario, and similar to the other example, let's execute this run book, right? So let's go here, and similar, we have the executions, etc., and it will ask us same inputs. So depending on the run book, the inputs might divert a bit in this scenario because we want to check against an object. Let's say that we will need to provide the resource name, and it's a slightly different. While on the other, it was only asking us for the bucket name. Here, it's just going to ask us the ARN of the bucket name. So what we'll do is, same goes. So it is my bucket repos, and I was trying to access my object, so a tree.jpg.
Yeah.
Now, because it's same accounts, and like we were mentioning earlier, it needs to have IAM role or IAM user. And if you look at here, it will tell you like why what is the format of the data that it requires. Right? For example, you can use an IAM user or the role, and for that you need to input that role. So let's say, for example, I have this role here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it will ask you then what type of request, if you want to have an assume session. If your object, for example, is a version object, if you have version enabled on your bucket, you might have different versions of the same object. So it gives you even that fine detail where you can actually go with like, oh, it's not this current object, it's the non-current object, and here is the version ID for the object that I'm trying to access, and on the same account, I'm not able to. And same goes. We were talking about KMS. If the object is KMS encrypted, I might also pass what is the key. If it goes through a VPC endpoint, like if I have, for example, that role on an EC2 instance, and I'm using a VPC endpoint to go into my buckets on that region, the VPC endpoint also has a permission. By default, allows all access through that VPC endpoint, but customers can restrict and then say, look, this role only has access to this bucket into this type of operations. So that could also be a cause for that access denied that the user might be having. Okay, so we fill it up. Similar, we can create a CloudWatch alarm. So same, and let's execute. Oh, sorry, my bad. Yep, you see, it asks what is the operation. So even if we forgot something, the run book will tell you exactly, hey, what is this? You are missing this parameter. Let's say that I want to do, for example, get object, right? Similar to what we do because we shared. So here is my get object. So this is the operation that I'm trying to do against this specific object using this role. Okay. Now we should be able to execute this successful. Okay, great. And now my runbook is executing. Similar behavior that we saw the earlier. So this is all the steps that my runbook is going to run. IAM check, etc., etc. Each of them will now have a status of what happened, what is doing it. So it should just be a couple of seconds. This is really fast because in the background, it's just making these API calls into the respectives. It checks on the IAM, checks on the S3, checks, etc. So now checking bucket policy. So everything that's successful, that's great. Okay, so we're now just waiting for the script to finish. So it didn't have any failure. Great, so it should be pretty fast. Okay, great. Now we can check the output. Okay, so what is going to say? So evaluate the policy, final decision. So it's an implicit deny for the S3 action. So we're gonna look, okay, so what happens is this message is going to tell me, okay, so your user has an implicit deny. So that means that you are missing a permission because you need to, and again, I know that I'm repeating, but it's never enough. By default, either IAM or S3, it's private by default. So this implicit deny, it's there. You need to explicitly allow that operation.
Yeah.
So it's very easy now to, okay, let me go into my role and check what is the permission that I'm missing. So it could be just you didn't put the get object, or on the resource, you forgot to put the /* so that you can actually read objects under the bucket. So it's very easy, as you can see, like, in a couple of minutes, we were able to do all of these checks, and now we have the final decision. So we can now focus on troubleshooting that scenario.
Yeah, makes life really easy. We have a question actually. It's coming up here right on the screen. So there you go. So is there an easy way to see if a bucket has policies pushed onto it from an org level, right? Let's say for example, from an SCP or SCP, service control policy, whatever it is, from an org level, are there policies which are pushed to a bucket, right? Any thoughts there?
So you need to keep in mind the policy. So your org can create those organization-wide policies, but those policies will not be saved on a bucket. So pretty much when you make a request, right? So what happens is if it's an IAM user, if it's an authenticated request, it starts with IAM. So it checks like, okay, is this IAM user exists? Does this IAM user has any policy that allows him to perform these requests? And that's where then the flow of the authentication, and it checks, is this account part of an organization? Does this organization has a policy why that might block this? And only after, if it allows, then it checks on the bucket policy itself. So that when you have an organization level policy, it does not, let's say, in the true sense of the word, it does not push that policy into the bucket. No, it has its own policy. So on the authentication path, let's say, it has its own stop. So when you are authenticating that request, it stops on the organization and checks the policies if it allows that. If yes, great, then the request moves forward, and that's when it goes into the S3. And it checks if the S3 bucket also allows that request, or if there is any explicit deny that might deny that request.
Yeah, makes sense. Awesome. Switching gears here a little bit in the interest of time, right? So Hugo, we were focusing really on access denied and whatnot, right? A lot of S3 related aspects here. But again, SAW here, which is support automation workflow, covers more than S3, right? There are different services and scope here. I know, Francisco, you have a great story to kind of talk about around how there was an issue last year where an update from a firewall vendor caused a global impact, right? So do you want to talk about that interesting story?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's one of the go-to stories that I have to say, because I woke up on the 19th of July where half the world was panicking a bit because suddenly Windows machines stopped, were not booting anymore. And this was due to, as you mentioned, a firewall setting that was pushed to those machines that made them basically unavailable. So there was a bit of panic at the beginning, but the vendor likely provided guidance on how to recover those machines. And one of the first instructions on how to recover those machines were to basically delete a file while booting in safe mode. Now, booting in safe mode on AWS, not the easiest way, since you do not have access to the physical hardware. You need to try to be a bit more creative, but we work with support immediately trying to figure out how to give that recommendation to our customers. And one of the things is basically trying to give them some instruction and publish the article that you're seeing that was updated multiple times, and basically giving manual instruction now to detach the volume from the affected instances, attach to an LT instance, delete the file, fix the disk signatures because we're booting with the same version of the operating system, and basically quite a few steps in order to achieve that job. So simple enough because the instructions were not particularly complicated, but might be, first of all, if you're not an expert, you might get lost a bit, especially if you are new and you're have to deal with an outage, basically. That might be a bit of a pressure, but also you might have a lot of instances where you have to go through this, right? And this takes time. So one of the things that we realized quite quickly is that, wait a second, we do have a support automation workflow that allows you to run commands and recovering instances, basically. This is the Start EC2 Rescue workflow. This is available for both Linux and Windows instances. And basically what it does is a runbook that will run a provided base64 script that could either be Bash or PowerShell for Windows instances. And will run that script on a helper instance and will help you to rescue instances. So this can be used for a lot of things, not only for deleting files, but also to fix registry entries on Windows, or maybe if you had, misconfigured some configuration file, maybe your SSH configuration file, you can fix that as well without having to have the instance online. Basically, what it does is that it takes a snapshot of the volume of the instance that's affected. It will mount it on the helper instance, which is known as the EC2 Rescue instance, and then we'll execute that base64 command to do whatever needed to do. So we work with a few of our Windows subject matter experts here in support, and we implemented a PowerShell script that will basically do what was the recommendation from the vendor to go and fix those instances. And that worked quite well. We had a couple of limitations. So we started listening to our customers. Customers started running those workloads. And initially, the Start EC2 Rescue workflow did not support encrypted EBS volume off the bat. So this is something that actually quite a few of our enterprise customers, since they have a quite high security requirements, they will be basically be using EBS encrypted volumes. So we quickly work with our team to go and modify that automation so that it will support the EBS volume. Second thing that we actually had was running this at scale. So because obviously, even if the automation takes care of everything, if you have 10 or hundreds of instances, you still need to go and run this workflow one at a time. Obviously, that speeds up things, but not the greatest experience. So we pushed an update that will allow to run on a set of instances based on the tags assigned to the instances. And this helped quite a few customers recover quite quickly. So with an automation, and again, not because it was particularly complex and not because it required particular expertise. Obviously, again, we have to take this into the context where everyone was scrambling to fix this as quickly as possible because a lot of workloads were affected by this. But you simply need to prioritize and try to figure out what you need to do next. And it was really a lifesaver. Was a really nice thing that we could implement this quite quickly. We were working quite closely, and as usual, this is something that happens with all of the AWS support workflow, as Gopi was mentioning as well. We basically build these in a couple of ways. First, we look at what is the historical incoming cases that we get into support. What are the common issues that our customers are running into? And we can make their life easier. We go look at the repos and see what are the common things that people are getting stuck with, either because it might be multiple steps, as we mentioned, where you can get easily lost in between things, or simply because maybe you're new in AWS, you still do not have the expertise. You want to have a quick, clean guide that you can follow, because again, with the step function visualization and looking at where the steps are in terms of the workflow execution helps quite a lot in terms of understanding what's happening behind the scenes. So it's also a great learning tool, especially if you're just getting started. So it works quite well both for experienced users and the new users alike. And the other thing that we do is also try to make life for our customers easier. So we have quite a few workflows that are used for log retrieval, for example, for EKS or other services. There's nothing particularly special, but it still requires time. And imagine every time we're getting a support case where we do need customer logs to go in a bit deeper, just makes life for everyone easier, right? We can point to the customer to the workflow. Can you please go and execute that and then give us the bundle of logs?
Oh, I love it.
basically it gets super easy, super fast,
Yeah.
and rather than having to wait maybe hours for someone to try to figure out, okay, what logs do I need, what are the things that I need to go and touch,
Awesome.
to give us all the logs that can help progress in the troubleshooting or even explanation of certain behaviors. So overall, I think that the real power, it's just the fact that you have now a runbook that can scale with your workforce as well. You can make this part of your training. Another great thing is that we see customers, sometimes they do fork our workflows to make them even better suited to their needs. There's nothing special or magic. So you can build your workflows, as Gopi mentioned. You can use that as part of your runbook operation for your organization. And you can definitely start from the support ones if you just want to expand on those or add those. And as usual, we're quite open to feedback as well. So if you want to see new features or if you want to see new workflows as well, just please let us know through our regular support channels or the feedback pages. We'll be more than happy of working to get those available to you.
Awesome. That's wonderful, right? I love the fact that SAW is covering multiple services and making life much more easier when there are like situations where it's kind of firefighting, right? You don't want to miss any steps when you're firefighting something.
You want to also to be safe, knowing that everything has been checked rather than leaving it to chance, right?
I love the fact that you have workflows which can collect logs too. In my previous life as a database person, I had to troubleshoot logs all the time, and getting those logs are always challenging, right? It's kind of tough, which is awesome. Wonderful. I noted something when Hugo was sharing the screen and doing the demo. You can actually run this runbooks in a multi-account scenario as well, right? You can pretty much run the runbook in a multi-account situation. Is that true? Like, let's say, for example, if I want to run this for a situation where I have resources in multiple account, I can still run this runbook, right?
So I can take.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, so you definitely can. So Systems Manager does support running the automations in multiple AWS region and accounts.
That's awesome.
The runbook needs to be able to support it, obviously, because it will need to take that as parameters. So, but it is definitely something that's built in that helps a lot customers that have organizations and they need to run these at scale. The same would be, you can collect logs across multiple accounts for maybe you have different clusters of EKS that are deployed in your development accounts, or you have this segregated in different regions because you're using the one account per region pattern. Definitely something that can be done and supports, it's fully integrated with organizations and runs off organizational units as well.
Great, awesome. So any questions from the audience here, right? I know you had a lot of fun looking at the demo, seeing SAW in action. Any last minute question before we wrap up? Let us know. Or you can post a question on repost as well, and we'll make sure it gets addressed for sure. Cool. Any last minute thoughts, Hugo, Francisco, and Gopi?
Just now that you have an overview of what is possible, and we just kind of like lift just the tip of the veil, right? So it's massive, like the example that Francesco gave, pulling logs. So you can see it has a lot of flexibility. So it's just, if you never play with it, just go there, run a bit, see how it, you already checked demo, so you already have a big picture of what you can do. Just go for it. And again, like Francesco said, if you have a great idea, just share with us. We'll be super happy to listen to your idea and have something.
Yeah, awesome. There's a comment that multi-session support is the best new feature implemented. That's great feedback. Thank you. Appreciate it.
And I can definitely say that we work with a lot of different accounts, so that definitely it is been a nice boon. Just one last thing before we close is that we're not only limited to troubleshooting or to collecting logs and so on. There's also a couple of workflows that we have for cost optimization. So we have automatic clone from from Xen to Nitro, which is quite interesting, because especially if you're on older generations. And we also have a workflow for reviewing the PostgreSQL workloads, which is quite nice as well, because it looks at the statistics and so on. And we're adding more and more. So there's a the System Manager Automation Runbook reference. There will be a list of all the runbooks as well, and you will find instructions on what are the expectations. And as Gopi was mentioning, all of this is documented and trying to give you an understanding of what the workload does behind the scenes and give you a better understanding of what's happening, rather than just run and forget. So something that where you can again gain additional insight in what's the rationale behind running those workflows as well.
That's awesome. I think we might have to have a separate session for talking about cost optimization. For sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's amazing. We'll do that for sure in a different day. So again, just to summarize, right? One of the key things which I learned today was start using SAW, right? Just go and start using it. I think it's really valuable. Give feedback for the team on what use cases you would like SAW to solve. That will be really helpful as well. That's the number one thing, right? It's not just S3 troubleshooting, it's beyond that, as Francesco was talking about the incident last year, right? And so that's the most important takeaway. Just start using SAW. Again, be sure to head over to repos.aws if you are not there yet. It's super easy. Use your favorite browser, head over to repos.aws, sign up using your AWS account ID or builder ID, and you can start exploring the platform, ask questions, explore all the articles which you saw, right? It has all insights on how to get started with SAW, etc. So please do that. And while you are there, also kind of follow our tag, repost tag. So we have a tag for repost, which you can follow to kind of learn about what new episodes are coming around repost as well. So please do that. Again, in the chat, you will see a survey link. If you can just take a minute or so, probably it's not going to take in a minute. Just let us know what you like about the show, what you would like us to improve on. That'll be great feedback. We love your feedback. We care about your feedback. So let us know in the chat, and we will definitely take your feedback seriously. Next week is going to be fun as well. So join us next week, Tuesday. It's going to be February 11th, 2 p.m. Pacific, where we're going to, again, dive deep into troubleshooting at scale with AWS, right? Again, AWS at scale, there are different dependencies. So we're going to dive deep into how you can incorporate some of the Gen AI aspects when you troubleshoot at scale within AWS, right? You don't want to miss that session. Please tune in next Tuesday, February 11th, 2 p.m. Pacific. With that, until next time, happy building. Thank you.
Happy building. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Cheers.
Thank you.